You know, when people say family's supposed to be there for you no matter what, it sounds like a basic truth, a law of nature, like gravity. But gravity failed me the day an SUV blew through a red light and turned my car into scrap metal. I woke up in a hospital bed, tubes, casts, monitors beeping somewhere above me. I hurt everywhere, ribs shattered, leg in a cast, stitches biting into my side. The first thing I asked was simple. Are my parents here? The nurse, kind but awkward, hesitated just a second too long. We contacted them immediately. They haven't arrived yet. I tried to reason it away. Maybe they were booking a flight. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. I texted, called, reached out like a fool who still believed. 4 days later, still nothing. No visit, no call, not even a damn voice note. On the 6th day, Marcus, an old buddy of my dad's, showed up with a wilted bouquet and pity in his eyes. He sat by my bed and said, "Tough break, Ethan. But hey, bright side, your sister Olivia won Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Big ceremony, big media buzz. Your parents were front row." I stared at him, numb. "They live-streamed it," he added helpfully. All smiles. Real proud moment. Meanwhile, I was lying there, stitched up like a broken toy, waiting for a family who had better things to do. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky. I felt erased. On day 8, the hospital door creaked open. Not with urgency, not with guilt, just the mechanical politeness of people ticking a box. Rebecca and Andrew Sinclair walked in like they were dropping by a charity event they didn't want to attend. My mother carried a cheap bouquet. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. "Ethan," she said, voice dripping in fake warmth, "we just wanted to check in. 8 days late." I didn't even pretend to smile. "You remembered you have a son?" I asked. The air stiffened like drying concrete. My father coughed, pulling at the cuffs of his jacket. "We've been extremely busy," he muttered. "Yeah," I said, busy celebrating Olivia's big moment. "Champagne tastes better than hospital food, huh?" Silence, thick, suffocating. And then came the real reason they were here, the part they couldn't text. Olivia had been arrested. Financial fraud, embezzlement. The golden child, the genius entrepreneur, the pride of the Sinclair name, caught siphoning investment money into shell companies. Rebecca wrung her hands. "We hired a lawyer, but the bail's too high. We've used everything we have. Ethan." She actually paused, as if the next words hurt her pride more than anything else in this disaster. "We need your help." I laughed. Not loud, not crazy. Just a small, sharp thing that cut the air between us like a scalpel. "You need me?" After 4 days alone in a hospital bed, after watching them live-stream my erasure, now, they remembered I existed. "Olivia's your sister," my father growled, low and hard. "Family sticks together." I leaned back against the pillows, feeling the ache in my broken ribs, feeling the bigger ache gnawing somewhere deeper. "Funny," I said, "I don't remember family sticking around when I almost died." Rebecca's face tightened like she'd bitten into something rotten. "You're too sensitive," she snapped. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I finally got tired of being invisible." They didn't like that. They left in a cloud of forced dignity, clutching their empty hands. I lay there, alone again, but for once, it didn't hurt as much. Maybe you only bleed for people who bother to show up. 3 days after they left the hospital, I heard the click of high heels outside my apartment door. I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, maybe, but not surprised. I'd already been home for a day, crutching around my one-bedroom place, trying to remember how breathing felt without hospital antiseptic in my lungs. I hadn't given them my new address. But people like Rebecca Sinclair always find a way when they need something. I didn't open the door immediately, let them stew. When I finally did, my mother stood there in her full performance armour, a designer coat, fresh blowout, makeup thick enough to host a Broadway show. Beside her, Andrew looked about as thrilled to be here as a tax collector at a funeral. "Ethan," Rebecca started, voice already fraying at the edges, "we really need to talk." "I doubt it," I said, and leaned casually against the doorframe, crutches tucked under my arms. "Unless you came to apologise. And I know you didn't." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Andrew cleared his throat. "Your sister needs us," he said stiffly, "and you're part of this family, whether you like it or not." I smiled. "Not kindly. You don't get to pull the family card now," I said. "Not after leaving me to rot while Olivia had her big moment." Rebecca stepped closer. "We were wrong. I admit that. But Olivia's future, the family's future, is at stake." "Funny," I said when my future was hanging by a thread. Nobody showed up. Andrew scowled. "Don't make this about yourself." There it was. The classic Sinclair move. Minimize, redirect, guilt trip. I didn't even blink. "Tell me, Dad," I said. "When you were shaking hands and taking pictures at Olivia's awards ceremony, did you think about me at all? Broken ribs, bleeding out alone in a hospital bed?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Rebecca's voice sharpened. "Ethan, we have no one else. The bail is astronomical. We mortgaged the Bend house. We're out of options." I leaned my crutch against the wall, crossing my arms. "So now I'm not the disappointment. I'm the last ATM standing." "That's not fair," Rebecca whispered. "No," I said. "What's not fair is raising 2 kids and deciding only one of them mattered." Her face crumpled. The act was good, Oscar-worthy even, but I didn't buy it. They tried to soften, plead. Rebecca grabbed my arm, a little too tightly for someone supposedly desperate, and said, "You're punishing us for loving her more." I looked at her like she was a stranger, speaking a language I'd never bothered to learn. "So, you admit it," I said. "You loved her more." "It's not like that," she started. I laughed. A short, sharp crack that echoed down the empty hallway. "It's exactly like that," I said. "It's always been like that." Andrew stepped forward, jaw tight. "If you don't help us now, Ethan, you'll regret it." Another threat. Another empty bluff from people who had already thrown me away. "I've been regretting it for 31 years, I said softly. "Regretting ever thinking I mattered to you," Rebecca blinked, stunned. Andrew's mouth pressed into a hard line. "Good. Let it hurt." I took a step back inside my apartment. "You have 5 seconds to leave," I said, my voice flat. "Or I call the police." Their faces twisted, anger, disbelief, outrage. Rebecca started to protest, but Andrew grabbed her arm and pulled her back. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew the old Ethan, the obedient, desperate for approval Ethan, was dead. Without another word, they turned and disappeared down the stairs. I closed the door, locked it, secured all 3 deadbolts, like I was locking away a chapter of my life for good. For a long time, I just stood there, forehead resting against the cool wood. My ribs still hurt, my legs still ached. But inside, something was different, something cleaner, stronger. Maybe you have to be broken open to finally build new walls. Walls no one can tear down again. That night, the messages started. Voicemails, emails, texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "Your parents are devastated. Olivia's bail hearing is in 2 weeks. How could you be so heartless?" I didn't reply. I didn't even read half of them. Instead, I opened a blank document on my laptop and wrote 3 simple lines. I am not responsible for saving the people who chose to abandon me. I am not the villain for protecting myself. I am done. I printed it out, taped it to my fridge, not for them, for me. Because when you grow up invisible, it's easy to forget that you have a right to exist without apology. It's easy to think you owe loyalty to people who only loved the idea of you, the version that served their pride. I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't a Sinclair trophy to be dusted off when convenient. I was Ethan. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The news broke like a rotten dam. Olivia Sinclair, golden child, future mogul, was officially charged with multi-million-dollar financial fraud. Local news loved it. National news loved it more. The headlines were everywhere: young CEOs, glittering career ends in handcuffs, investors betrayed by promising entrepreneur. From awards stage to courtroom, the fall of Olivia Sinclair. I sat on my couch, leg propped up on a pillow, watching it unfold with a lukewarm cup of coffee in hand. The same coffee I'd made 3 times that morning because I couldn't stop smiling long enough to finish a cup. Marcus texted me a screenshot, Olivia's mugshot. Marcus, your sister's new headshot. Want me to frame it? I didn't answer, but I saved the photo. Not for gloating, for remembering. Because sometimes you need proof that karma has a long memory, even when you don't. Of course, my phone wouldn't stay silent. First, the guilt brigade from my family, then the escalation. Rebecca and Andrew weren't just begging anymore. They were rewriting history. Suddenly, it wasn't that I refused to help. It was that I had always been the jealous, bitter one, the problem child who couldn't stand seeing Olivia succeed. Relatives I hadn't heard from since I was 6 started popping up in my inbox. Your mother said you're holding grudges from high school. Your father told us you refuse to support the family out of spite. You're tearing the family apart, Ethan. Right, because nothing says family unity like ghosting your son in the ICU. Sophia called me one evening while I was making dinner. An old college friend turned corporate attorney, sharp as razors, loyal to a fault. You good? She asked without preamble. Better than ever, I said, flipping a grilled cheese like I was on a cooking show. Good, she said, because your parents are about to unleash hell. Olivia's PR team is spinning it already. Poor girl, pressured too young. No family support. I laughed, a real one this time. Let them, I said. I'm not playing in their circus anymore. Sophia hesitated. You sure you don't want to fire back? For a second, the idea was tempting. Post the hospital records. Upload the unanswered texts. Screenshot the pleas that went ignored. But then I shook my head. No, I said. They want a war. I'm giving them silence. Silence is louder when people expect you to scream. The next day, I woke up to find my social media tagged in a distant cousin's rant. How could Ethan be so heartless to his own sister? Family means forgiveness. He's not even offering to help when they need him most. I clicked block without a second thought. Not angry, not sad, just done. Because when people show you who they are, really show you, you stop expecting anything else. Meanwhile, the public wasn't nearly as kind to Olivia as my family hoped. Twitter roasted her. Reddit turned her downfall into a meme. Golden girl turned con artist. From CEO to cell block E, there were GIFs, there were TikToks, there were parodies of her acceptance speech from the awards ceremony, the same one my parents had chosen over sitting by my hospital bed. I didn't cheer, I didn't post a damn thing, I just watched. Watched as the empire built on lies, favoritism, and spin crumbled under its own weight. They thought I would cave, that I would break and come crawling back, desperate for scraps of their approval. Instead, I was having coffee with Marcus, laughing about a bad movie we'd just watched, when Rebecca tried to call again. I didn't even let it ring twice before silencing it. She left a voicemail anyway. Her voice was wrecked, not the fake wrecked she used to play on command. Real, desperate. Ethan, please. Your sister's future depends on this. Your father's lost clients. Our reputation. I deleted it before she finished the sentence. Later that week, I got an email from my Aunt Lydia, the only relative I halfway respected. She kept it short. I don't know all the details, Ethan, but I know you, and I know you're not cruel. I'm sorry you were treated like a footnote for so long. Take care of yourself. Don't let them rewrite your story. I sat there a long time after reading it. Not crying, not raging, just breathing. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't chasing. I wasn't defending myself. I was standing still while the whole damn mess spun itself into oblivion without me. The family's smear campaign ramped up until it burned out from lack of oxygen. Eventually, even the cousins stopped posting. No one cared anymore. They couldn't keep the lie alive because Olivia's trial date was set. Because the court documents were public. Because screenshots don't bend to emotional blackmail. And because I didn't feed the fire, I moved quietly, changed my phone number, new email, new locks on my door. Building management flagged Rebecca and Andrew Sinclair under my no admittance list. If they showed up, security would handle it. I wouldn't even need to lift a finger. Sophia joked about getting me a t-shirt, survived a family smear campaign, and all I got was inner peace. Not a bad idea, honestly. I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't victory music playing behind me. It wasn't fireworks or a gotcha moment. It was silence, stillness, freedom. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't a grand takedown. It's living a life so peaceful, so untouched by the wreckage they created, that they can't even reach you anymore. They wanted me broken. They wanted me begging. They wanted me chained to guilt. Instead, I was free, and for the first time, the chains they wrapped around my neck were lying in a forgotten heap behind me. I didn't win. I just walked away, and that was enough. A few weeks later, the final blow came. Olivia cut a deal, confessed to everything. Fraud, money laundering, wire crimes stacked like Jenga blocks ready to collapse. 12 months in federal prison. 2 years of community service. No financial penalties, but only because she sang like a canary and handed over evidence on everyone she worked with. A cooperation agreement, they called it. Funny. The girl who spent her whole life outshining everyone couldn't even face the music alone. She needed a plea bargain to survive. I found out through Sophia, who texted me the news with exactly 0 fanfare. Sophia, Golden Girl, officially downgraded to federal inmate #48,692. Enjoy your weekend, I smiled. Not because I was happy to see her fall. I wasn't petty like them. I smiled because it had nothing to do with me. Because I had no part in it, no blame, no guilt, no stake. Olivia Sinclair built her own empire on lies. She was the one who brought it down. All I had to do was stay out of the rubble. As for my parents, the whispers said they'd mortgaged their second house, took out private loans, burned through their retirement, trying to keep the family name afloat. Pride costs more than college tuition, apparently. Rebecca sent me an email once after the sentencing, a long, rambling thing about family, forgiveness, fresh starts. I didn't even open it. Just hit delete without a second thought. Andrew tried calling the office number listed on my portfolio website. My receptionist, bless her passive-aggressive soul, told him, "Mr. Sinclair is not available to speak with you, ever. Professional, sold, final. Exactly the way it needed to be. I changed my routines after that. Started walking at sunrise instead of dragging myself through the day half dead. Learned how to make coffee properly instead of chugging burnt office sludge. Painted my walls lighter colours. Started reading again. Real books, not endless news feeds about people who never cared. Marcus came over sometimes with takeout and stupid movie pics. Sophia dropped off law, thrillers she swore were better than Netflix. None of it was dramatic. No big declarations. No replacement family montages. Just living. Simple. Uncomplicated. And for once, not lonely. One evening, I sat on the small balcony of my apartment, coffee in hand, watching the sun crawl down behind the city skyline. No phone buzzing, no crisis looming, just air, space, freedom. A neighbour I barely knew passed by and waved. I waved back. In that tiny, quiet moment, I realised something profound. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fireworks or big speeches. It arrives like a slow tide, subtle, steady, inevitable. I thought maybe I'd miss them. The calls, the chaos, the performance of belonging. But I didn't. I missed the idea of family, not the reality. The real version was just smoke and cracked mirrors. And I wasn't going to live in a funhouse of lies anymore. Months later, I heard that Olivia was struggling to find work. That companies didn't want to touch her name with a 10-foot pole, that Rebecca and Andrew were quietly selling off assets to stay afloat. I didn't gloat, didn't post memes, didn't even mention it to friends over coffee. I just filed it away in the same mental cabinet where I kept all the old birthdays they forgot, the awards they brushed off, the accidents they ignored. Dusty, unimportant, done. Freedom didn't taste like vengeance. It tasted like silence, like breathing without a 20-ton weight on my chest, like waking up and knowing nobody controlled me anymore. It tasted like peace. One Saturday, I sat in a corner bookstore downtown, nursing a cup of espresso and flipping through a novel. An older woman beside me dropped her book, and when I handed it back, she smiled. "You look like someone who's come a long way," she said. I smiled too. Real this time. "I have," I said. "Longer than most people realize." She nodded knowingly, like she understood without needing the backstory. Like maybe she'd walked a few broken roads herself. Leaving it didn't feel like cutting ties. It felt like dropping dead weight. No ceremony, no public announcement, no closure email. Just gone. They had spent decades teaching me that my worth depended on how well I played the role they scripted for me, and I finally understood. I wasn't a character in their play. I wasn't a prop in Olivia's highlight reel. I was Ethan Sinclair, a man with broken ribs, a broken heart, and finally, an unbreakable sense of self. And that was enough, more than enough. Always had been. Story 2. You ever realize your family doesn't actually like you? Like, not even a little. "Hi, I'm Lila 28F, and a few months ago I got married." Supposed to be the happiest day of my life, right? Well, let's just say it became a crash course in surviving family betrayal, live and unfiltered. If you've got a minute, I want to lay this out, because apparently I'm now the villain in my family's group chat. Maybe you'll see why I did what I did. Growing up, I was basically an afterthought. I'm the second daughter in a family that worshipped my older sister, Mia 32F. Mia was the perfect child, the golden girl who could do no wrong. Me? I was the kid who ruined the aesthetic of family photos. Our mum, Patricia, is what you'd call an almond mum, always on a juice cleanse, always judging everyone else's bodies while smiling sweetly through gritted teeth. Dad, George, cared about exactly two things: stocks and quarterly earnings. If you weren't a profitable investment, you weren't worth his time. The only real warmth I ever knew came from my grandmother, June. She was the one person who made me feel seen, baking cookies with me, showing up for every music recital when my parents didn't bother. But everyone else? I might as well have been wallpaper. Boarding school wasn't a punishment, it was an escape. By the time I was 13, the house was unbearable. Mia had this talent for making me the villain in every scenario. Mum's antique vase shattered. Must have been clumsy little Lila. Dad's missing wallet. Of course, Lila stole it. The time Mia threw a massive party and trashed the house, I invited bad influences. It was like living with a professional gaslighter. Every time I opened my mouth to defend myself, I was being dramatic or making things up for attention. When Mia broke a crystal family heirloom, a bowl that had survived 3 generations, I got blamed. Full stop. No hearing my side. Mum cried like someone had died. Dad said I was out of control. Within a week, I was packed off to a boarding school 3 states away. I barely saw them after that. Birthdays? Missed? Piano recitals? Crickets? Science fair trophies? I mailed them home. Not that they cared. Eventually, I stopped expecting anything. And honestly, it hurt less that way. College was my fresh start, until Mia blew it up again. When it came time for university, I needed help with tuition. Surprise, surprise, turns out Grandma June secretly paid my way, not Mum and Dad like they claimed. I only found out after graduation. During that time, I kept my head down. I met friends who treated me like a human being. I even fell in love, really properly in love, with a man named Alex. We built a life together, far away from the chaos I grew up with. But life being life, I had to move back in with Mia for a year while finishing my degree. It was like falling into a time warp. She was still the queen bee, the hometown sweetheart who could do no wrong. And me? Still the invisible one, except now with student loans and a part-time job. She made digs about my looks, my grades, my boring friends, hosted parties and conveniently forgot to invite me, spread rumours that I was a late bloomer who couldn't keep up. But the final nail in the coffin? Senior year? College prom. I walked into the party and caught Mia making out with my boyfriend. She looked me dead in the eyes, smirked, and kept going. No apology, no shame, just smugness, like she'd won something. When I told my mother, she shrugged. "You shouldn't let a boy come between you and your sister," she said. As if Mia hadn't set the whole house on fire and handed me the match. So I cut them off. I moved across the country, finished school, built a life with Alex. Slowly, I healed. I barely spoke to my family for years. I'd send polite Christmas texts, get a few dead-eyed responses in return, and that was it. I finally accepted that I was an outsider, not by choice, but by design, until Alex proposed. I knew it would be messy, telling my family, but I didn't expect this. The wedding invites were the final battle. Alex and I decided to get married in our city. Not hometown drama, no fake smiles. Just our friends, my in-laws who, bless them, treat me like family, and the people who actually loved us. When I sent the invites, I left one person off intentionally, Mia. I didn't want her near me. Period. Of course, Mum noticed immediately. "You forgot your sister's name on the invitation," she said breezily. Before I could even respond, she added, "Don't worry, I told her she's coming anyway." I told her it wasn't a mistake. I didn't want Mia there. Cue nuclear meltdown. According to Mum, I was holding grudges and hurting the family. Dad chimed in with his classic, family comes first, business second line ironic, coming from a man who missed my high school graduation because of a golf trip. When I pointed out, calmly, that Mia had literally slept with my boyfriend, Mum dismissed it like a spilled glass of wine. It's ancient history, she snapped. Grow up. I said if Mia came, I wouldn't walk down the aisle. Their response? If she's not invited, none of us are coming. For about 2 days, I cried. And then? I got mad. Not messy, screaming mad. Cold, surgical mad. I realised if my parents were threatening to boycott the happiest day of my life unless I rolled over for Mia, they never deserved to be there in the first place. So I made a different call. If they were going to weaponize family unity, I was going to show them exactly what their version of unity had cost them. I invited the one person they betrayed most. Someone who hadn't been at a family gathering in over a decade. Someone whose absence they pretended to never notice. I'll be honest, inviting Aunt Clara wasn't just about revenge. It was about finally choosing myself. Growing up, Clara was like a soft place to land. She used to take me out for ice cream when I got a bad grade or let me crash on her couch when I just needed to get away from the tension at home. She was safe. And then one day when I was 13, she just disappeared. No warning, no goodbye. It was like one of those old photo albums where someone's face gets scratched out. I asked about her once. Mum's exact words, she made her choice. She's not part of this family anymore. End of discussion. But sitting there with my wedding plans in ruins, something inside me whispered, find her. And for the first time in a long time, I listened to my gut instead of my guilt. Finding Clara wasn't easy. I dug through old contacts, Facebook groups, even stalked a few mutual friends. Finally, after about a week of detective work, shout to caffeine and pure stubbornness, I found a forwarding address. Turned out she lived only 2 hours away. When I knocked on her door, she looked through the peephole like she was expecting a bill collector. But when she saw it was me, older, probably a little more worn down than she remembered, she hesitated. I raised a hand awkwardly. Hi, it's Lila. June's granddaughter? A long pause. Then the door creaked open. Inside it was warm, smelled like cinnamon and fresh paint. Nothing fancy, just real. She handed me a cup of tea without asking, and we sat in this kind of stunned silence for a minute, like neither of us could believe it was happening. Finally, I told her everything. About Mia, about Mum and Dad threatening me, about how Grandma June still thought she'd abandoned her. Clara just closed her eyes for a long time, like she was trying to hold back the years. Her side of the story gutted me. Turns out Clara didn't leave because she wanted to. She left because she was forced out. Mum and Dad had twisted Grandma June against her, convinced her that Clara was choosing some loser boyfriend over the family. They told June that Clara was planning to elope, that she didn't care about family traditions, that she laughed behind June's back about being old-fashioned. None of it was true. But by the time Clara found out what lies had been planted, June wouldn't even take her calls. And the worst part? After June had a minor heart scare, Dad told Clara she wasn't allowed to visit the hospital. Said it would stress June out too much. Meanwhile, he was feeding June a completely different story, that Clara didn't even bother to show up, that she didn't care. It was devastating. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a straight-up heist of love and trust. And Clara, she just gave up. She packed her life into a moving van and disappeared. All these years later, she still cried telling me about it. Not loud, ugly sobs, just silent tears sliding down her cheeks, like she'd been holding them in since the day she left. I asked her to come to my wedding. At first, she refused. Said she didn't want to cause trouble, didn't want to make things harder for me. But I told her the truth. The trouble was already there. It wasn't about avoiding conflict anymore. It was about finally standing in the open instead of hiding in the dark. Besides, I wanted her there, needed her there. So she agreed. And just like that, the universe shifted a little. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't walking into battle alone. Wedding day arrived, and chaos followed close behind. Everything was beautiful at first. The weather was perfect. The flowers were perfect. Alex looked at me like I hung the damn moon. But then they arrived. Patricia, George, and Mia came storming into the venue like a mini hurricane. And the first thing Mom did? March straight up to me and hiss, "You didn't tell us Clara was invited." I smiled sweetly. "Oh? I must have forgotten. You know, mistakes happen." Her face went so red I thought she might actually pop a blood vessel. Behind her, Mia was giving me her usual smirk, the one that said, "I always win." And Dad was just standing there stiffly, like someone had forced him to show up at a peasant's event. They didn't cause a scene right away. They sat through the ceremony, whispering furiously to each other while I walked down the aisle. But the second we moved to the reception, all hell broke loose. First came the snide comments. Mia made some loud remarks about how the decorations looked cheap, and DIY Mum kept loudly suggesting we should have had the wedding back home where things are done properly. Dad? He sat at his table, scowling into his scotch like it had personally offended him. But the real explosion happened when Clara pulled Grandma June aside for a private conversation. They disappeared into a side room, just the two of them, and my parents panicked. They banged on the door, demanded to be let in, tried to get Alex's mother involved, like this was some emergency family summit. Meanwhile, Mia decided to entertain herself by live streaming her fake tears on Instagram, claiming she was being humiliated and bullied at her own sister's wedding. Yeah, sister. Like she didn't throw that title away the second she kissed my boyfriend. My poor sister-in-law, Alex's sister, stepped in like an absolute champ. She intercepted the drama, calmed the guests, and basically ran interference all night like a professional event planner. And me? I stood back, holding Alex's hand, watching it all unfold like a badly written soap opera. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was just done tiptoeing, done apologizing, done setting myself on fire just to keep other people warm. This wasn't their day. It was mine. And they were the ones who chose to bring matches. The real fireworks were just getting started. Because while they were busy causing a scene, Clara and June, they were reconnecting. And when they emerged, hand in hand, the looks on my parents' faces were pure horror. You'd think they'd seen a ghost. In a way, they had. The ghost of the family they tried to erase, finally coming back to life. The moment Grandma June and Aunt Clara walked back into the reception, holding hands like no time had passed, the entire room shifted. It was like someone dropped a match into a room full of gas fumes. Mum's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might shatter. Dad started muttering under his breath. And Mia grabbed her phone like she was about to film another episode of Poor Me, The Tragedy Continues. I caught Grandma's eye across the room. She smiled. And it wasn't the polite, strained smile she used to fake during family dinners. It was real, bright, alive. I realized then maybe she hadn't known how much she'd been lied to either. Of course, my parents couldn't just leave it alone. Dad stormed over, demanding to know what was going on. Grandma June, bless her, stood her ground. She looked him right in the eye and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, I finally heard the truth, Dad sputtered. You're being manipulated. No, Grandma cut him off, her voice calm but sharp. I was manipulated by you for years. Silence. You could have heard a wine glass drop from across the hall. That was when everything came out. Clara told the story, not in anger, not in drama, just simple, brutal facts. How Dad and Mom poisoned her relationship with June. How they blocked her calls, intercepted her letters, made sure every olive branch she tried to extend withered before it ever reached Grandma's hands. The hospital lie, the birthday card they hid, the flowers they claimed were from a friend. Piece by piece, she laid it bare. And standing there watching my parents squirm, I felt something break loose inside me, something I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. All those years of believing I was invisible, all those years of thinking I just wasn't lovable enough. It wasn't me. It was them. They didn't take it well. Mom burst into fake tears, clutching her pearls like some bad community theatre actress. Dad turned red, blaming miscommunications and hurt feelings. Mia, of course, filmed part of it, spinning it like we were ganging up on her. Classic. But nobody bought it. The people who mattered, Alex, my in-laws, my real friends, stood by me. And for the first time in my life, I stood by myself. The fallout was nuclear. After the wedding, Mia went live on Instagram, full sob story mode. She told her followers I was jealous, that I had bullied her and destroyed our family out of spite. She even claimed that I threw my parents out for no reason, conveniently skipping the part where they tried to hijack my wedding like a bunch of angry toddlers. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. She racked up sympathy comments by the hundreds. Poor Mia, poor perfect Mia. The sister who could steal boyfriends, sabotage birthdays, lie straight through her teeth, and still come out the victim. But me? I was done playing defense, so I took action. I hired a lawyer, filed for defamation. Because here's the thing, words have consequences, especially when you weaponize them in public, in front of thousands of strangers. The lawsuit hit her like a brick wall. No more cute Instagram lives. No more crocodile tears. She tried to backpedal, of course, claimed it was just venting and nobody would take it seriously. But the videos spoke for themselves. Clear as day, slander, lies, intentional harm. The court agreed. Mia had to issue a public apology on all her platforms. Real apology, not some sorry you felt hurt nonsense. And she had to pay damages, not enough to make me rich, just enough to make sure she never forgot who she messed with. And my parents, they got theirs too. Aunt Clara, God love her, wasn't finished. She sued Mum and Dad for emotional manipulation and harassment, brought receipts, old emails, text messages, even a voicemail where Dad told her, "You chose your boyfriend over your family. Stay gone." Grandma June testified, "So did I. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth." And when the gavel finally fell, it was like the air got lighter. They had to pay Clara damages, real, significant ones. Enough for her to rebuild the life they tried to steal from her. Grandma didn't stop there. A month later, she called me and Clara over for tea. No small talk. She pulled out her will, told us she was rewriting everything. Mum and Dad. Cut out completely. Everything, the house, the heirlooms, the savings account, was being left to me and Clara, her real family, the ones who stood by her, not just when it was easy, but when it was hard. I tried to tell her she didn't have to do that. She just smiled and said, "You don't owe people loyalty just because you share blood." That was the last time I cried over them. Fast forward to now, my parents tried to spin it, called me ungrateful, a traitor, a homewrecker. They even tried to rope in my mother-in-law, calling her up and telling her she should talk some sense into me. She laughed in their faces, blocked their numbers. My in-laws, my friends, my husband, they have my back. More importantly, I have my back. We got restraining orders, set boundaries, built walls they'll never climb again. And life? Life is good. I'm married to the love of my life. Clara and Grandma June are rebuilding their bond one Sunday lunch at a time. Our house is filled with laughter and light and messy little moments that feel real for the first time. No fake smiles. No walking on eggshells. No burning myself up just to keep someone else's lies warm. Just peace. And if I ever doubt for a second whether I made the right choice, I look at my wedding photos, at the smiles that weren't forced, at the hugs that weren't staged, and I remember sometimes the family you choose is worth more than the family you were born into. Story 3. If you had told me a year ago that my parents would choose my cousin over their own daughters, I would have laughed. Now, I'm not laughing. I'm Emma, 26F. I've been living at home while finishing my master's in counselling psychology, an arrangement that's always worked for my family. Mum Clara, 54F, and Dad Mark, 56M, have been endlessly supportive, pushing my siblings and me to chase our dreams, even if it meant we stayed home a little longer than most. I'm the middle kid. My brother Liam, 29M, is the oldest, corporate, no-nonsense, always ambitious. And my sister Zoe, 22F, is the baby, soft-hearted, fiercely creative, studying graphic design at a nearby community college. We grew up close. Not perfect, no family is, but there was always this unspoken rule. We had each other's backs. Always. That rule got tested 2 months ago. It started when my cousin Dylan, 24M, showed up out of nowhere, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, a half apology on his lips. Dylan is my mum's nephew, Aunt Marissa's son. Growing up, he was the wild one, funny, charming, reckless. The kind of guy you loved at a summer barbecue but didn't trust with your car keys. His life had been a series of bad turns, dropping out of college, job hopping, messy breakups. His latest relationship with a woman named Taylor had crashed and burned. She'd kicked him out. He had nowhere to go, too proud to go back to his mum's place. And of course, my parents, the bleeding hearts they are, opened our guest room door without a second thought. At first, Dylan was fine, helpful even. He mowed the lawn, helped Dad clean out the garage, even offered to look over Liam's resume for a few job leads. For a while, it felt almost good, like we were doing something meaningful, giving Dylan a second shot. But things started to shift, slowly. Then all at once, it started with Zoe. Little jabs at her outfits, trying a little hard for the barista, huh? Dismissive comments about her art projects, good luck paying rent with those doodles. At first, I brushed it off. Dylan had always been a bit of a teaser, but something about his tone now was meaner, cruel, calculated. I pulled him aside one afternoon while we were both grabbing coffee in the kitchen. "Hey Dylan," I said, keeping it light. "Ease up on Zoe, okay? She's been working really hard." He just shrugged, cracking open a soda. "Come on, Emma. She needs thicker skin. I'm doing her a favour." The real world's not kind. Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. Meanwhile, Zoe started disappearing. Where she used to spend evenings sketching at the kitchen table, she now holed up in her room, door locked. When I asked if she was okay, she just shook her head and said, "I don't want to cause drama." And so the tension in the house thickened, like smoke you couldn't see, but you could feel burning in your lungs. It all blew up at dinner one Friday night. Mum made baked ziti. Dad opened a bottle of wine, and for a minute it almost felt normal. Liam was telling us about a promising interview when Zoe, smiling shyly, mentioned she had a date planned with a guy from her photography class. Before the words were even out of her mouth, Dylan leaned back in his chair, grinning like he'd just caught her in a lie. Whoa, Zoe's getting bold. Hope your boy toy knows you're a sheltered little thing. Probably thinks he's getting a wild one. Zoe froze. Her fork clattered against her plate. Dylan wasn't done. Maybe you should warn him you cry if someone raises their voice. Or, better yet, pretend you're a tortured artist. Chicks like that get sympathy points. Everyone was staring. Dad gave a half-hearted chuckle, clearly uncomfortable. Mum frowned, but said nothing. Something inside me snapped. That's enough, I said sharply, setting my glass down with a thud. You're a guest here, Dylan. If you can't show some basic respect, you can leave. He barked out a laugh, ugly and loud. Respect? From the girl still mooching off Mommy and Daddy? Tell me, Emma, when's the real world gonna smack you upside the head? The air in the room turned electric. Liam glanced away. Mom pressed her napkin to her mouth. Without thinking, I stood up. Dylan, I said, my voice shaking. You don't get to humiliate Zoe to make yourself feel better. Grow up. He stood too, looming over the table. You think you're better than me? You're just scared because you see your future in me, pathetic and stuck. And then, in one final, dramatic gesture, Dylan grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence he left behind was deafening. I looked around, expecting my parents to back me up. They didn't. Dad cleared his throat. We all need to be patient, he said stiffly. Dylan's going through a lot. Patient? Patient while he tore my sister down. I turned to Mom, but she just looked exhausted. He's family, Emma. We have to give him grace. And just like that, I realized, grace was infinite for Dylan. Respect for Zoe? For me? Apparently, optional. I bit back tears, pushed my chair back, and left the table. Behind me, the conversation awkwardly resumed, like nothing had happened. Except everything had. The next 2 days were worse. Dylan came back like nothing happened. Mum and Dad called a family meeting. The kind we hadn't had since we were kids, and someone had broken a window or dented the car. Dylan will be staying another month, Dad said. We all need to try harder to get along. I tried to explain, again, how Dylan's behaviour was hurting Zoe, how it was making our home feel hostile and unsafe. Mum waved a hand like she was brushing away smoke. It's just cousin teasing. You're overreacting. Dad nodded. You girls need thicker skin. And just like that, the message was clear. Keep quiet. Keep the peace. Protect Dylan's feelings at the expense of your own. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, feeling something inside me shift, something permanent. This wasn't the family I thought I knew. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if home was really home anymore. After that family meeting, things didn't just get tense. They got unbearable. Zoe practically disappeared into her room, barely speaking at meals, if she even showed up at all. Liam buried himself in job applications and gym sessions, pretending nothing was happening. And me? I was stuck in this weird limbo, too angry to stay silent, too trapped to actually leave. Meanwhile, Dylan acted like he owned the house, sprawled out on the couch, flipping channels like he paid the mortgage, making crude little comments under his breath every time Zoe dared to exist in the same room as him, mocking her outfits, sneering at her hobbies. I tried to keep my distance, I really did, but it wasn't always possible. One night, I came home late after a study group. As I walked into the kitchen to grab some water, I heard voices, Dylan and Zoe. At first, it sounded casual, then it didn't. You think he actually likes you? Dylan's voice, dripping with mockery. Come on, Zoe. Guys like that don't date sad little art girls. They hook up and ghost. I didn't even think. I dropped my bag and pushed the door open. Dylan, enough. He smirked at me like I was a mosquito buzzing in his ear. What? Big sis coming to the rescue again? He said, spreading his arms wide. Gotta protect the fragile princess. I walked right past him to Zoe, who was standing there frozen, her eyes glassy. You okay? I asked her gently. She nodded, but her hands were shaking. Dylan chuckled, grabbing a beer from the fridge like he hadn't just gutted the room with a few sentences. That night, Zoe and I talked in her room. I sat cross-legged on the floor while she perched on her bed, arms wrapped around her knees. I don't feel safe here, she whispered. I don't even feel like this is home anymore. Hearing her say it out loud made my stomach twist, because I felt it too, and Mum and Dad were still pretending not to see it. I promised her, quietly, fiercely, that I wouldn't let it slide. I started documenting everything. Times Dylan made inappropriate comments. Incidents where he cornered Zoe or said something gross. Dates, times, what was said, where we were. Just in case. I needed backup. Because if my parents weren't going to believe us based on our word, maybe they'd believe cold, hard facts. The final straw came 2 weekends later. Zoe had her date. She spent hours getting ready, nervous but excited. Her first date in a long time. I helped her pick out an outfit, gave her a pep talk, and practically shoved her out the door. She came home glowing. It should have been a good night. Instead, Dylan was waiting for her in the living room. He muted the TV as she walked in, grinning like he'd been waiting all night just to ruin this moment. Well, well, look who finally got someone to notice her, he said loudly enough that even Dad looked up from his laptop. Zoe blushed and mumbled goodnight, trying to dart upstairs. But Dylan wasn't done. What? No juicy details. Come on, Zoe. Did you even get a pity kiss? Or did he run for the hills when he saw your sketches? Dad chuckled awkwardly. Mum didn't even look up from her phone. I saw red. Before Zoe could even respond, I stood up. That's it, I said, my voice low and shaking. You don't talk to her like that. You don't talk to anyone like that. Dylan leaned back against the couch, unfazed. Lighten up, Emma. It's just jokes. No, I said, taking a step closer. You're a bully, and you're not welcome here if you're going to keep making this house miserable. His face twisted into something ugly. You think you get to decide who's welcome? You're just another freeloading brat. Grow up. Mum finally looked up, but instead of saying anything to Dylan, she gave me a warning glance. The same look she used to give us when we were little and arguing too loud in public. I laughed. It wasn't funny. It was just so ridiculous I couldn't help it. I turned to Dad. Are you really okay with this? With him treating your daughter like trash in her own house? Dad rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache. He's family, Emma, and he's going through a rough time. You girls need to stop making everything into drama. Drama, right. Apparently, being humiliated daily wasn't a real problem. It was just drama. Zoe ran upstairs, wiping tears from her face. I didn't follow her this time. I just stood there staring at the people who were supposed to protect us, realizing painfully that they were never going to. They didn't want the truth. They wanted peace. Even if that peace meant sacrificing us on the altar of family loyalty. Later that night, I sat on my bed scrolling through rental listings. I couldn't afford anything decent on my own, not while finishing my degree, but maybe if I got a roommate, scraped by. The thought of leaving Zoe alone in this mess made me sick. The next morning, I made a decision. I borrowed a small, hidden camera from a friend in my program, the kind you could wedge between books on a shelf. totally inconspicuous. It wasn't legal exactly, but I didn't care anymore. I needed proof. Proof that Dylan wasn't just teasing. Proof that this wasn't just family drama. Over the next few days, I recorded everything. And then, finally, it happened. One afternoon, the camera caught Dylan cornering Zoe in the kitchen, blocking her path, getting way too close. His hand reached out toward her face. Not playful, not funny, just gross. You could see the fear in Zoe's body language as she ducked under his arm and ran upstairs. When I watched the footage, I felt sick. This wasn't teasing, this was harassment. And still, part of me dreaded showing it to my parents. Because deep down, I already knew how they'd react. I showed Zoe first, she cried, but not out of fear, out of sheer, exhausted relief. Someone believed her. Someone saw it. We decided to confront our parents together. I waited until Dylan left the house for one of his half-hearted job interviews. Then I sat Mum and Dad down at the dining table and pulled out my laptop. "Before you say anything," I said, my voice shaking, "I want you to watch this." I pressed play. They watched in silence as the video rolled. When it ended, Mum burst into tears. Dad turned red, but not the way I hoped. Not anger at Dylan, anger at me. "You had a camera in our house?" he thundered. "You spied on your own family?" I blinked at him, stunned. "Dad," Dylan cornered Zoe, "you saw it." "That's not the point," he snapped. "You violated our trust." "How could you?" Mum chimed in, voice trembling. "We understand you're upset, honey, but Dylan's been through so much. He didn't mean any harm." I laughed again, bitter and hollow. "No harm?" I said. "No harm when your daughter feels like a prisoner in her own home? When she's afraid to even walk through the kitchen?" They didn't answer. They didn't have to. Their silence said it all. Dad's jaw tightened. "If you can't live with the situation, maybe you should reconsider your place here. A threat, subtle, ugly, real. They weren't going to protect us. They were going to punish us for speaking up." I packed a bag that night. Zoe did too, and without a big speech, without a dramatic goodbye, we left. Just two daughters, carrying everything we could in a couple of duffel bags, walking out of the house we used to call home. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't sure we'd ever go back. After Zoe and I left, we crashed at my friend Kayla's apartment. It was small, a one-bedroom with a pull-out couch, but it felt safer than the big, empty house we grew up in. At first, it didn't feel real. I kept waiting for my phone to blow up with texts from Mum, apologies, please to come home. Some sign that maybe, just maybe, they realised what they'd done. Instead, nothing. Radio silence. A week passed. Then 2. Finally, Jake, sorry Liam, texted. "Mum and Dad are worried. They think you're overreacting. Just come home and work it out. Work it out." Right. Like Zoe hadn't been emotionally battered for months, like leaving wasn't already the hardest thing we'd ever done. Zoe cried a lot that first week. Big, messy, heartbroken sobs that she tried to muffle into a pillow. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to figure out how we were supposed to survive. Because here's the ugly part nobody tells you. Choosing yourself isn't just emotional. It's financial, it's logistical, it's survival. I had enough saved to cover a month or 2 of rent if I lived dirt cheap, but between my classes and practicum hours, getting a full-time job wasn't an option. Zoe had some savings from her part-time gigs, but nowhere near enough. We sat in Kayla's living room one night, laptops open, spreadsheets pulled up. "What if we just go back?" Zoe said quietly. "Just until I graduate." I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't saying it because she missed them. She was saying it because she was scared. And God, I understood. But I shook my head. "If we go back," I said, my throat tight, We're telling them it was okay, that what happened to you didn't matter. Zoe bit her lip, nodded. And so we didn't go back. Instead, we found a tiny, dingy 2-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. It smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke, but the locks worked and the walls were ours. We moved in with hand-me-down furniture, second-hand dishes, and the kind of stubborn hope that comes from having no other choice. I picked up a part-time job at a community centre, working evenings. Zoe started freelancing more, taking on any photography gig she could, birthday parties, graduation photos, pet portraits, anything. It was hard. So hard. There were nights I sat on the floor of our new place, staring at the peeling paint, wondering if we'd made a mistake. But then Zoe would come home, dump her backpack by the door, and give me a tired little smile. And I knew we hadn't. We were finally free. Broke. Exhausted. But free. A month later, things shifted again. We decided, after a lot of debate, to take the video footage to the police. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about destroying family. It was about making sure Dylan couldn't hurt Zoe or anyone else without consequences. Filing the report was terrifying. Sitting there, retelling everything to strangers in uniforms, handing over the video, answering every uncomfortable question. But the officers we dealt with were kind, professional, serious. They didn't brush it off as drama. They didn't ask what Zoe was wearing. They just listened. A few weeks later, Dylan was charged with harassment. A restraining order followed. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of either of us. When my parents found out, through the police, not us, all hell broke loose. Mom called, sobbing, accusing me of ruining the family, begging me to drop the charges. Dad texted once, "You crossed a line." And then nothing. Liam, the golden child, the peacekeeper, finally took a side. Ours. He started visiting, bringing over groceries when he knew we were struggling. He sat with us in our tiny kitchen, head in his hands, admitting he should have spoken up sooner. "I thought if I stayed out of it," he said. "I wasn't part of the problem." He looked at Zoe, this little sister he hadn't protected, and apologised, tears in his eyes. It didn't erase everything, but it mattered. Months passed. Life didn't get easier overnight. Bills still piled up. Classes still demanded more hours than the day had to give. But bit by bit, we built something. Zoe got her first real photography contract, shooting a local wedding. I finished my practicum and lined up a job offer at a non-profit. We celebrated with gas station pizza and a 6-pack of cheap beer, sitting on our battered second-hand couch, laughing until our stomachs hurt. Not because everything was perfect, but because for once it was ours. Ours alone. Last week, Mum texted, "We miss you. Come home for dinner?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I missed them too, in a way. Or maybe I just missed who I thought they were. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted revenge, but because some things, once broken, can't be pieced back together with casseroles and small talk. Home isn't a building, it's a feeling. And sitting on that beat-up couch next to Zoe, our whole messy, hard-won life ahead of us, I realised something. We'd already found it.